Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Koritis. Today is Monday, September 28th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. The title of today's podcast, Presidential Showdown. Of course, this is the day before the first presidential election scheduled to take place tomorrow, September 29th, in Cleveland, Ohio, hosted by Fox News anchor Chris Wallace. Again, I think Chris Wallace will do a pretty good job. He did a good job in the last presidential debates. He was the final host, if you will, or moderator of the third debate between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And I really hope, as I have stated here before when we have discussed this topic of the first presidential debate, I really hope that Chris Wallace is tough but fair with both of these candidates. And I think he will be. But I'm hoping that he is, because if either one of them, Thunder Thumb, Sleepy Joe, if either one of them starts to go astray or starts to peddle some major line of BS, which is all but certain is going to happen, I really want Chris Wallace to interject and say, no, sir, that's not what you've said before. No, sir, that's not how the policy came to be, etc., etc., etc. Whatever it is, whatever he can possibly do to fact check them on the spot, because some things are going to be very, very easy to call BS on. All right, now, from a personal standpoint, when it comes to this presidential debate, I can only be pleasantly surprised. I don't know about you, but I can speak for myself here. All right. I can only be pleasantly surprised because this thing can turn into a national disgrace very quickly. I mean, even if you go back and watch previous presidential debates, they're really not that good. I don't care who the candidate is. I don't care who ends up winning the presidency. I don't care. If you just go back and you watch and listen to some of these debates, they're terrible. They're terrible. And then when we get the results that we get, I guess we really shouldn't be surprised when you go back and study them and listen to what's going on. So tomorrow, I can only be pleasantly surprised. Get the popcorn ready. Will, Donald Trump, will he bring Joe Biden down into the pig pen, in the chaos and in the muck? Because that's where Donald Trump makes his living. Will he easily fluster Joe Biden? Quite possibly. Will Joe threaten him? Will he want to do a push-up contest? God only knows. I mean, that's how out of control this can get. Now, again, the president and his campaign have set the bar very low for Joe Biden. I mean, they're trying to create this caricature of him of being senile, old, and really doesn't know where he is. So all Joe Biden has to do for an hour and a half, 2 hours on stage is complete sentences. And if he can do that, and if he can look like he has it together, and if he can formulate a cogent argument, well, then, hey, if anybody was on the fence, if anybody was thinking, well, you know what, Donald Trump, he might have something there with this state of mind in which Joe Biden might be experiencing, he might have something there, so let me watch this debate, because I'm on the fence. If Joe Biden rises to the occasion, and again, it's not that high of a hurdle, he could step over it, that might be enough to persuade somebody who is on the fence to vote for Joe Biden. Now, I think because once you set the bar so low for your opponent, you therefore set the bar higher for yourself. So Donald Trump is going to have to come out and actually put something together. Now, of course, those who are already in Trump's corner, he could pretty much literally shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and not lose a voter from his base. That, unfortunately, is probably a true statement. So it doesn't matter what comes out between now and then. Those people are with him. That's just how it is. But there are still a number of people out there, if we want to believe the polls, the various polls out there, that there's still a decent amount of people who are undecided. It's not as much as there was during the 2016 debate, but there are still enough undecideds that could potentially sway the election, especially in the swing states. And tomorrow we will obviously do a analysis of the presidential debate, and then later this week, may that be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe all three, will be a continuation of that analysis, but we're going to be looking at the Electoral College. I will obviously do that here on the podcast, but I will also put up some videos, which you can find where we put everything on our website, thecapitalnews.com, a YouTube channel, etc. That way you can visualize it, because there's going to be a lot of numbers thrown around, a lot of scenarios that we're going to discuss. And, it's really hard to handicap what's going to happen, because the popular vote, of course, is one thing, but it comes down to the Electoral College. This can be a doozy. And if 2020 has been a lesson to us, and I hope it has been, anything can happen. Anything can happen, to the point where it could be a tie. You need 270 Electoral College votes to win the presidency. 270 is the magic number. Well, there's a map out there, folks, with the Electoral College that, in my estimation, could be a reality, where it's 269 to 269. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. I hope it doesn't happen, because, but wouldn't that sort of be some sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, divine comedy, divine tragedy, the state of affairs of this country, of how divided we are? If it were to really come down at 269, what would happen? My goodness. We know what happens constitutionally as to how it goes to the House and how that gets squared away, and we'll talk more about that. But wouldn't that just be the perfect picture of how divided the country is if it should come down to 269? Now, the president, of course, is out there trying to stoke a lot of questions and a lot of doubt into the elections, which I just think is completely unpresidential, and pretty much it's un-American too. Ballots aren't going to be counted, going to be harvested. You can't trust this. You can't trust these elections. It's rigged if I lose, but if I win, well, then that's perfectly okay. That's what was supposed to happen. Now, I have some issues myself with some of the mail-in ballots. I think there's legitimate questions to be raised. But for the president to come out and make certain comments in regards to it's rigged if I lose, but if I win, then it's perfectly fine, now that's just not right. It's not presidential, it's un-American, and those words should never be uttered from a president of the United States, or somebody who is running to be the president of the United States. Previous comments that he has made over the past couple of weeks and continues to make with regards to the coronavirus, and basically separating the country into blue states and into red states. This is a country that is divided. The job of a leader is not to further stoke those divisions, whatever might be causing them, or to create others. It is your job to rise above it and to be the president of the United States of America. Not the president of the red states, not the president of the blue states. And to say that if we didn't count the blue states, we'd have some of the best numbers in the world. And of course, that's in regards to coronavirus cases and deaths. That's not leadership. That's not leadership. We're supposed to be better than this. You can think, okay, well, you know what, maybe we're really not. But we're supposed to be. Can we not try to be? And I guess, in a way, it's a blessing that the president utters these words out loud, on camera, from the White House. And people just don't seem to pay attention, at least those people who would support him and would literally continue to support him if he shot somebody dead on Fifth Avenue. This is akin to the Nixon tapes, except we had to get the tapes to know what Nixon was saying. Trump just blurts it out right in front of you. But you're going to march into the voting booth, and a lot of you are going to get your little sticker that says I voted, and you're going to vote for 4 more years of this. There is other options out there to make a stand. Most people aren't going to do that, though. I understand. Have to be realistic. I understand people aren't going to do as I suggest and vote for the Libertarian candidate, Jo Jorgensen, who is, by the way, again, on all 50 ballots. And that in Washington, D.C. Yet she's not going to be on that debate stage tomorrow. Why not? Why not? Oh, that's right, because we only have a 2-party system in this country. You only get 2 options, ladies and gentlemen, in the land of the free, home of the brave. Choices, choices, choices. You only get two. You get Coke or Pepsi. That's it. Red or blue. Does that sound American? Does that sound right? No, if it was some fringe candidate who was only on a few ballots, I can understand why that person might not be on the stage, but somebody whose name is going to be seen by every American across the country on their ballot has earned the right to be on that debate stage. Doesn't mean you have to agree with what she says. You don't have to agree with what Donald Trump says. You do not have to agree with what Joe Biden says. But they're there nonetheless, aren't they? What harm would it bring if Jo Jorgensen was on that stage? Might she upend the apple cart? Might she cause people to wake up and think, my goodness, who is this woman? Where does she come up with these ideas? Doesn't she know there's only a two-party system? Doesn't she know it's only the talking points of the Democrats or the Republicans? There can be no third option. There can be no fourth option or fifth. This is the United States of America. You get the Republicans or you get the Democrats, and you're going to like it. And then most of you will be back here in 4 years scratching your head, regardless of who you voted for. My goodness, why aren't any of those problems solved? How many times in previous podcasts have I mentioned history? Have I mentioned authors? Books that I have read, books that I have suggested that the audience reads. Economics books primarily, not textbooks. Economic history. Economic analysis of various policies. Some of them going back the Great Depression, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and you read them as if they were written last week. It's just that the numbers got bigger. That's all. If it was a million, now it's a billion. If it was a billion, now it's a trillion. And then in the not too distant future, if it's a trillion, it's going to be a quadrillion. Because there's no end in sight to this madness. And of course, none of this is going to be addressed by Donald Trump or Joe Biden or the Republicans or the Democrats. And Chris Wallace most likely isn't even going to bring this up either. No structural issues will be addressed. We'll hear about Trump's tax returns because that's back in the news. We'll hear about the kids and how they're involved with the campaign and with the administration. We'll hear about Joe Biden's kids and how they were involved and got this, that, and the other. This is going to be a circus. This is going to be a zoo. This is going to be like watching the monkey pit, and you know what they throw around. That's what this is going to turn into. The country's crumbling. The country faces some serious issues now and going forward. But those are probably going to be the highlights. It's just going to be the mudslinging back and forth between these two. I hope that's not the case. I hope I am pleasantly surprised. But I can only be pleasantly surprised. If this turns into a national disaster, a national disgrace, I'm not going to be surprised in the least. That's what I'm expecting. That's what I'm expecting. Because I've heard their arguments. I've heard their policies, what little they have. They're not good. It's the same garbage. Now, how can we expect to have a different outcome if it's the same garbage? They're using the same playbook. How can we expect a different and better result? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And we have reached the point of no return. Mathematically speaking, demographically speaking, this is it. This is just their chance to forward more of the same in the hopes that the music does not stop playing under their respective tenure. That's all this is. Cut taxes, regulations, raise some taxes here, some climate change stuff over there. It's all bogus. It's all bogus. Do you think Chris Wallace is going to ask them about the Federal Reserve? Do you think he's going to ask them about the debt levels? Do you think he's going to ask them about the unemployment situation? That he might bring up. Will he ask them about the evictions and what they're going to do about that? With the 30 to 40 million evictions that might be waiting in the wings? Even if that's an overshoot, even if they really overshot it, and it's, let's say, 10 million evictions, well, that's akin to the great financial crisis a decade ago. That's nothing to sneeze at either. What's their plan of action there? How much longer are these moratoriums going to last for? What about the landlords? What about the developers? What about the middle-class Americans who own a second or third home to rent it out? Are they going to be able to continue to pay? Those questions going to be asked? What about the other moratoriums on student loans? What are they going to do there? Those going to be forgiven? Is that the plan? Well, who's going to end up paying for that? People who didn't go to college? People who did, quote unquote, the right thing and saved up? Worked a little bit harder, didn't go out every weekend, didn't take a vacation, worked an extra shift, sacrificed, paid theirs off, just to have everybody who didn't do those things, have them forgiven? Is that the plan? Is that the course of action? Is that the way it's going to be? Student debt, $1.7 trillion. If it's forgiven, that immediately goes on the backs of every American through the national debt. Fantastic. Is that the plan? What about health care? Trump's been bragging about health care for the past 5 years. There's nothing. Now, there's going to be some half-assed policy that I'm sure gets circulated out there before November 3rd. What teeth is it going to have? What difference is it really going to make? And again, I've been down this road many times before. Why do you want these people in Washington, D.C. to determine your health care? To be involved so significantly in these markets? Republicans aren't always going to be in power. So then the Democrats are going to change it. And the Democrats aren't always going to be in power. So the Republicans are going to change it again. Why do you want something that's so personal to you to be treated as a political football? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Furthermore, it's bankrupting us through their mismanagement and this back and forth because they don't care about you. They want the power. They want to be able to give all the sweetheart deals to anybody who lined their campaign coffers. They don't care about you. This is the game. They just want to trick you and convince you every election cycle with those magical keywords that get you going in either direction. Put on the performance. Show you the circus. Don't you love me? Don't you want to give me another 2, 4, 6 years? I said all the right things, didn't I? Who cares about the record? Who cares about the hypocrisy? I told you what you wanted to hear. Vote for me again. That's all it is. What about the bankruptcies and insolvencies that are waiting in the wings? Chris Wallace going to ask either one of them about that? Donald Trump might have an interesting take on it. He's been bankrupt several times himself, hasn't he? He'll tell you. Great businessman. Great businessman. And all of the massive layoffs that will ensue because of those bankruptcies and insolvencies. Will Chris Wallace ask them about the significant amount of zombie corporations that are wandering the landscape? I doubt it. Does Donald Trump know what a zombie company is? Does Joe Biden? I mean, we're getting close to Halloween. I think that's an appropriate question. What about it? How is that good for economic growth? There's more surveys out there now that a lot of the cash that is sitting on some of the balance sheets of some of the corporations who actually have cash, it's not going to go to capital expenditures. Well, what a surprise. What a freaking surprise that is. It's going to go to more share buybacks and maybe dividend payouts. Now, if it goes to dividend payouts, oh, that's good. Seriously, it is. That's why you own stocks. You want the dividend. That's why you're an investor. The buybacks, that's more financial engineering. And the lack of capital expenditures, which has already been anemic to begin with, well, it's just going to get that much more worse. That's a lack of innovation. That's a lack of research and development. That's a lack of productivity. Those are all negatives. Capital expenditures is what's supposed to be the driving engine of an economy through savings and capital investment. That's how it's supposed to work. Not off of debt and not off of spending at any cost. We have it all backwards, and we're going to continue to do so because nobody wants to man up. There are no leaders. Nobody wants to tell the truth. Nobody wants to say, okay, we have to sacrifice. We got to roll up our sleeves. Not going to happen. Will Chris Wallace ask either of these gentlemen tomorrow during the first presidential debate? Will he ask them, how can we have half of this country broke? How can half of this country be broke? No savings at all. They're broke. How can that be? How can that be the United States of America? Furthermore, will Chris Wallace ask these two gentlemen tomorrow on the stage, if we take into consideration total federal government spending with state and local government spending, takes us to a total of $9.6 trillion. $9.6 trillion. That's half the economy. Just about. Just about half the economy. What do we have to show for it? Silence. That's exactly what you're going to hear from both of them. You would think we would have the best infrastructure in the world. We don't. You would think we would have the best and the fastest internet speeds in the world. We don't. You think we would have the best K through 12 education system with our students constantly and consistently ranked in the top 3 across all fields of study. We're not. We're not. And the list just keeps on going and going and going. What are we getting for it? What would be their answer to that question? I would love that question to be asked and answered. I would love Mr. Wallace to ask these two gentlemen tomorrow about the national debt. Does it matter? Why? Why not? If it does matter, what are you going to do about it? If it doesn't matter, why doesn't it matter? And if that's the case, then why do we pay taxes? And why do people have to pay their bills? If Uncle Sam doesn't have to pay his, then why do the people have to pay theirs? How can this be? I highly doubt most of those questions are going to be asked, and I don't think it's anything that is overly complicated or overly complex. I think those are basic questions. And to be perfectly honest with you, the entire hour and a half, 2-hour debate could be filled just with those handful of topics and those handful of questions. I would love to see their command of these issues, because these are facing everybody. What about the dollar's reserve status? These questions aren't even going to be pondered. Not even going to be pondered. Trump will make you believe that what's going on, any protests, any riots, any this, that, and the other is Biden's America, even though it's all happening under his watch. And somehow his base buys this. Somehow his base believes that Donald Trump will cure the virus and the riots and the protests, when he becomes the president. Oh, wait a minute, he is the president. Can't make that connection. Boof. Explosion in the cranium. Can't make that connection. It's Biden's America somehow. Not that Biden's going to make it any better, but I'm not calling this Biden's America because Biden is not the president. Donald Trump is the president. I don't want Donald Trump in there. I don't want Joe Biden in there. They've proven they don't deserve to be there. You have other options. You probably won't take them, unfortunately, and now we'll have to deal with the consequences of that. So those are some questions I would like answered, probably not even going to be asked. I mean, if I'm running, I'm bringing those issues up, even if I'm not asked about them, because those are the structural issues. The shenanigans going on with the Federal Reserve. The bailouts, the trillions of dollars printed, for what? $7.2, $7.3 trillion spent up to this point today. And at the end of September, and only a couple days away, it will be the conclusion of the fiscal year. Okay? We are at $4.2 trillion federal budget deficit. 4.2. All right? Spending 7.2, 7.3 trillion. What do we have to show for it? Why are you calling for more spending in the realm of $1.5 to $2.5 trillion if everything is perfectly okay, if the economy is coming roaring back, if this is a miraculous super V recovery. Why do we need more spending of money that we do not have? Can you explain the consequences of this? Can you provide a cost-benefit analysis of this, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President? Can you please do that? Can you at least talk to people through the steps as to how that money makes its way through the printing press and then into the various hands? Who gets it first? Who gets it second? Who gets it last? In the effects thereof. Can you do that for us? You should have an understanding of that, shouldn't you? Because it's all about the economy, stupid. You'd think they would have an understanding of some of these principles, some of these institutions, the mechanics, how it all works. No, I don't think they're going to bring it up. I don't think they're going to bring it up. Commodity prices, I have to bring this up because natural gas is spiking 33%. 33% to the upside. We saw a 33% decline in the price of lumber last week. These markets are completely busted. This is the type of movement that we might have to get used to as this great unraveling takes place in the midst of the greatest depression. Talk about taxes. Talk about them. I hope they talk about them. What are you going to do? You really going to cut them? How are you going to cut them? What's that going to do to the deficit? Again, you go right back to where you were before. Do they matter? Don't they matter? If they don't matter, then why have taxes at all? Just get rid of it. So why have the tax cut? Just get rid of them. Which is what I advocate for, but you got to cut the spending. Where are you going to cut spending? Neither one of them want to touch Social Security. Neither one of them want to touch Medicare. Except Biden might want to expand it to give people universal coverage some point down the line. Where are you going with all of this? These are the same arguments. These are the same policies. What do you think you're getting out of this? Those are some questions to ponder. Trump's tax turns were all the rave today in the media. I mean, really? Did we really learn anything new with what the New York Times is putting out there? Again, if you're a Trump supporter, especially deep into his silo, you don't care. You don't care. If you're totally against Trump, this just proves to you in your mind what you already thought you knew. So it's really just those people on the fence that maybe say, okay, enough's enough. All right, that's finally a legitimate concern. Okay, he has all of this money out there, maybe a few $100 million in personal debt that he owes. Who does he owe it to? Can those institutions or perhaps individuals or perhaps foreign countries, can they have some sort of sway over him? That's a legitimate question. That's a legitimate question. That's part of spycraft. Find somebody who has a lot of debt and say, if you give us information or do what we want, we'll pay it off for you. We'll pay it off for you. That's a legitimate question. Who are the banks that he has money with? Probably Deutsche Bank. There's already been reporting out on that. And Deutsche Bank, I mean, my God, they already got screwed by Trump a few times. And we know what's going on with all of their money laundering and all of the other illegal activity that Deutsche Bank has been involved with for years. I mean, we've been talking about that FinCEN investigation. I mean, I've barely given the audience a synopsis of that, and we've had 2 podcasts on it already. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Will Mr. Wallace ask Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden those questions about how these banks are conducting themselves? About the money laundering schemes, the financing of Ponzi schemes, human trafficking, drug trafficking, weapons, and God knows what else? You think any of that's going to be brought up? I don't think so. But the circus is most likely going to continue. I'll be back tomorrow. Watch the circus, watch the presidential showdown. Hopefully, I'm pleasantly surprised, but I'm not counting on it. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Kapital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.